The school cafeteria buzzed with laughter, the clinking of lunch trays, and the murmur of students engaged in their daily conversations. Among them sat Emily, a kind-hearted 12-year-old girl, unwrapping her neatly packed sandwich. She glanced across the room and noticed the school janitor, Mr. Thompson, sitting alone on a bench near the exit. His uniform was slightly worn, and his weathered hands held a small brown paper bag with what seemed like a simple meal inside. Emily had always seen Mr. Thompson working tirelessly, mopping floors, fixing broken lockers, and making sure the school stayed spotless. But despite his efforts, he remained invisible to most students. That day, as she looked at her extra apple and sandwich, something inside her nudged her to do something different. She hesitated for a moment. Would it be rude? Would he refuse? But her heart won over her doubts. She picked up her lunch and walked toward him. "Hi, Mr. Thompson," she said with a warm smile. "I brought an extra sandwich today. Would you like to share lunch with me?" The janitor looked up, surprised. A smile slowly spread across his face as he nodded. "Why, thank you, Emily. That's very kind of you." They sat together, eating in comfortable silence at first. Then, they started talking. Emily asked about his day, and he, in turn, asked about her classes. As they chatted, Emily realized that Mr. Thompson had a gentle, wise way of speaking. He wasn't just a janitor. He was someone with stories to tell, experiences to share. The lunch period ended too soon, and as Emily packed up, Mr. Thompson said, "Thank you, young lady. You didn't have to do this, but it meant a lot." She smiled. "It was my pleasure, Mr. Thompson. See you tomorrow." Little did she know, the next day would bring a revelation that would leave her, and the entire school, speechless. The next morning, Emily walked into school with a bright smile. She had enjoyed her conversation with Mr. Thompson and decided to bring an extra sandwich again, hoping they could share another lunch. As she walked through the hallways, she overheard a few students whispering near the bulletin board. "Did you see the article?" One of them said. "Yeah, I can't believe it. Why is he even working here?" Another added. Curious, Emily stepped closer. On the bulletin board was a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Former CEO of Thompson Industries spotted working as a school janitor." Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized the photo instantly. It was Mr. Thompson. But instead of his usual janitor uniform, he was wearing a sharp business suit, standing in front of a towering office building. Emily's eyes widened as she read on. Robert Thompson, once a highly respected business magnate, disappeared from the corporate world years ago after an unexpected resignation. Now, sources confirm that he has been seen working as a janitor at Ridgewood Middle School. The reason behind this drastic change remains unknown. Emily's mind raced. Mr. Thompson was a CEO? How did a man who had everything end up as a janitor at her school? Still processing this shocking news, Emily headed to class, but she couldn't focus. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the kind man who had quietly cleaned the hallways and fixed broken desks. During lunch, she searched for him, finding him in the same spot as yesterday. But something was different. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a somber expression. He had clearly seen the article. Emily hesitated before approaching him, unsure if she should mention it. But when she sat down beside him and offered him the sandwich, he sighed and said, "I suppose you saw the newspaper?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, is it true?" Mr. Thompson gave a small, sad smile. "It is." Emily bit her lip. "Why did you leave all that behind?" For a moment, he was silent, staring down at his hands. Then, with a deep breath, he said, "Because I realized too late that success isn't measured by wealth, but by the lives we touch. And I had to start over." His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Emily knew there was much more to his story, and she was determined to find out. Emily stared at Mr. Thompson, her mind spinning with questions. How did a powerful CEO end up mopping the floors of a middle school? Why did he give up everything? Taking a deep breath, she asked, "Mr. Thompson, what happened?" He looked at her for a long moment before chuckling softly. "You're persistent, aren't you?" She grinned. "I just want to understand." He nodded, his eyes clouded with memories. "All right, but it's a long story." Emily sat up straight, eager to listen. "I used to own a company," he began. "Thompson Industries. It was my pride and joy. I built it from the ground up, working day and night to make it successful. I had everything: wealth, recognition, influence." His voice grew quieter. "But in the process, I lost something far more important." Emily tilted her head. What do you mean? Mr. Thompson sighed. My family. My wife, my son. I was so consumed with success that I neglected them. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, and all the small moments that truly matter. Emily's heart sank. She couldn't imagine not having her parents around. What happened to them? He rubbed his hands together as if trying to warm them. One evening, I got a call. My wife and son had been in an accident. I rushed to the hospital, but... He paused, his voice breaking. I was too late. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Oh, Mr. Thompson. I'm so sorry. He gave her a sad smile. Thank you, Emily. That was the moment everything changed. I had spent my life chasing money, thinking it would bring me happiness. But when I lost them, I realized how empty my success really was. For months, I tried to go back to work, but it didn't feel the same. Every board meeting, every contract I signed, it all felt meaningless. I couldn't stand looking at my office, knowing that I had sacrificed my family for it. Emily listened intently as he continued. So one day, I walked away. I resigned, sold everything, and disappeared from the corporate world. People thought I had lost my mind. Maybe I had. He chuckled dryly. But I knew one thing. I wanted to live a life with purpose. Emily frowned. But why become a janitor? He smiled. Because I wanted to do something simple. Something honest. I didn't want power or money anymore. I wanted to contribute in a different way. To serve. To help others without expecting anything in return. She thought about all the times she had seen him around the school. Fixing lockers, sweeping floors, cleaning up messes that no one else wanted to deal with. He had been helping all along, just in a way people rarely noticed. That's really inspiring, Emily said quietly. But don't you miss your old life? Mr. Thompson considered her question. Not in the way you'd think. Do I miss my family? Every single day? But do I miss the money, the stress, the constant chase for more? No. This job, as small as it seems, gives me peace. Emily was silent for a moment before saying, I think what you're doing is amazing, and I'm really glad we had lunch together. He smiled, genuinely this time. So am I, Emily. So am I. Little did Emily know, their conversation was about to change everything. The next morning, Emily couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Thompson's story. She sat in her first class, tapping her pencil against her notebook, her mind drifting back to his words. I wanted to contribute in a different way, to serve, to help others without expecting anything in return. She had never met someone like him before, a man who had everything but chose to walk away. It made her wonder, how many other people in her life had hidden stories? How many others were more than what they seemed? At lunch, she found herself searching for Mr. Thompson. She spotted him near the janitor's closet, refilling a mop bucket. Taking a deep breath, she walked over. Mr. Thompson, she called. He turned, a warm smile appearing on his face. Ah, Emily. How's your day going? Good, she said, shifting on her feet. I wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. She hesitated. You said you wanted to help people. But don't you think you could do more? I mean, you were a CEO. You had power, influence. Couldn't you help more people if you still had all that? He chuckled. That's a fair question. But tell me, Emily, what does helping people really mean to you? She thought for a moment. I guess making a big difference. Changing lives. He nodded. That's what I used to believe too. I thought helping people meant donating millions to charities or building schools in my name. But I've learned something over the years. Real change doesn't always come from grand gestures. Emily frowned. Then where does it come from? Mr. Thompson gestured to the bustling cafeteria behind them. From moments like this. A conversation. A simple act of kindness. When I was a CEO, I was too busy chasing big success to realize how much power there is in small, everyday actions. She bit her lip, thinking about his words. She had always dreamed of doing something huge with her life. Becoming famous, making an impact. But now, she wondered if she had been looking at it the wrong way. That evening, Emily sat at the dinner table with her parents, still lost in thought. Emily, her mom said, You're quiet today? Everything okay? She snapped out of her thoughts. Yeah, just thinking. Her dad raised an eyebrow. Thinking about what? She hesitated before saying, Do you think small acts of kindness matter? Her mom smiled. Of course, sweetie. Why do you ask? Emily glanced at her plate. I met someone recently. He used to be a CEO, but now he's a janitor at my school. He told me that real change comes from small things, not big actions. Her dad leaned back in his chair. Sounds like a wise man. I always thought I needed to do something huge to make a difference, Emily admitted. But now, I don't know. Maybe it's the little things that matter more. Her mom reached over and squeezed her hand. They do, sweetheart. The world doesn't just change through big moments. It changes through small ones, too. Emily nodded, but deep down, she wasn't satisfied. Mr. Thompson had given up everything to live a simple life. But was that really the only way? Was there a way to combine both, using success to help others while still keeping a sense of purpose? She was determined to find out. The next day, Emily waited by the janitor's closet, determined to see Mr. Thompson again. When he finally arrived, she stepped forward. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson." "Morning, Emily." He chuckled. "I have a feeling you have something on your mind." She nodded. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how small actions make a difference." "And?" he asked, curious. "And? I think you're right. But I also think you're wrong." His eyebrows lifted. "Oh." She took a deep breath. "I think small moments matter. But I also think you don't have to give up success to make a difference. What if you could do both?" He studied her for a long moment before smiling. "Go on." Emily pulled out a notebook. "I did some research last night. Your old company, Thompson Industries, is still around. But ever since you left, it's lost its vision. It's making money, but it's not helping people." He sighed. "I'm not surprised." "So," she continued, "what if you went back? Not as a CEO, but as a mentor? You could teach young entrepreneurs about what really matters. Not just money, but purpose. You could guide them to build businesses that actually help people." Mr. Thompson leaned against the mop handle, clearly deep in thought. "That's an interesting idea." Emily's heart pounded. "You always say small actions matter. Well, what if this is one of them? What if this is your way to make a difference?" He looked at her, something unreadable in his gaze. Finally, he let out a soft chuckle. "You remind me of someone, Emily." "Who?" "My son," he said quietly. He always asked the big questions. Always believed in people, even when they didn't believe in themselves. Emily swallowed hard. Then maybe this is a sign. For the first time since she met him, Mr. Thompson seemed genuinely uncertain. But then, slowly, he nodded. Maybe it is. For the next few days, Mr. Thompson was quieter than usual. Emily noticed that he no longer hummed while mopping the floors, nor did he pause to greet students with his usual warmth. Something weighed on his mind. One afternoon, Emily found him sitting alone on a bench outside the school. She hesitated before approaching. "Mr. Thompson?" He looked up and smiled faintly. "Hello, Emily." She sat beside him. "You've been thinking about it, haven't you? About going back?" He sighed. "I have. And I won't lie, Emily, it scares me." Emily frowned. "Why?" He gazed into the distance. "Walking away from that life was one of the hardest things I ever did. And now, the thought of stepping back into it, it's overwhelming." "But you wouldn't be going back as the same person," she reminded him. "You've changed. You've learned what really matters. You could make a difference." He smiled, but there was hesitation in his eyes. "It's not just that. The business world is ruthless, Emily. When I left, I turned my back on powerful people. People who don't believe in kindness, only profits. If I return, I'll be facing them again, and they won't welcome me back." Emily crossed her arms. "So you're just going to let them win? Let them keep running things the wrong way?" Mr. Thompson chuckled softly. "You remind me so much of my younger self. I used to believe that passion alone was enough to change the world. But reality isn't that simple." She leaned forward. "Maybe not. But you always told me small actions matter. Maybe this is your small action, mentoring young business leaders so they don't turn into the kind of people who only care about money." He was silent for a long time. Then, finally, he exhaled and nodded. "You might be right." A few days later, Mr. Thompson took his first step toward his old life. With Emily's encouragement, he reached out to an old friend, Daniel Carter, a former business partner who had always believed in ethical leadership. They arranged to meet at a small cafe in the city. Emily insisted on coming along. When they arrived, Daniel was already waiting. He was in his late 50s, wearing a crisp suit, but his face lit up with genuine warmth when he saw Mr. Thompson. "My God, Robert," Daniel said, standing to shake his hand. "I never thought I'd see you again." Mr. Thompson smiled. "Neither did I." They sat down, and after ordering coffee, Mr. Thompson explained his idea: mentoring young business leaders, creating a space where ethics mattered as much as profits. Daniel listened intently before nodding. "It's a brilliant idea, Robert. And it's exactly what the business world needs. But there will be resistance, Mr. Thompson warned. I made a lot of enemies when I walked away. Daniel smirked. And now you'll show them you're not finished yet. Emily grinned. That's what I've been telling him. Daniel turned to her. You must be Emily. Robert mentioned you in his message. I can see why. Smart, determined. Emily blushed. I just believe in what he's trying to do. Daniel chuckled. Well, Emily, I think you just might have changed the course of business leadership. Mr. Thompson shook his head, smiling. She has a habit of doing that. As they discussed their next steps, Emily felt something shift. She had always dreamed of making a difference, and now she had played a role in something bigger than herself. And for Mr. Thompson, the path ahead was no longer just about returning to the past. It was about shaping the future. A month later, the transformation was already underway. With Daniel's help, Mr. Thompson had launched a mentorship program aimed at young entrepreneurs and business students. The initiative focused on ethical leadership, sustainable business practices, and putting people before profits. Emily watched in amazement as everything came together. Mr. Thompson was no longer just a janitor. He was a teacher, a guide, and an inspiration to many. One afternoon, he invited her to one of his first mentorship sessions at a community center. Emily sat among the attendees, mostly young professionals eager to learn. Mr. Thompson stood at the front of the room, looking confident and determined. He started with a simple question. How many of you have ever been told that business is only about making money? Almost every hand went up. He smiled knowingly. That's what I used to believe too. And for years, I chased success, thinking that wealth alone would bring me happiness. But I was wrong. He shared his story, not just the rise and fall, but the lessons he had learned along the way. He talked about the importance of kindness, the power of small actions, and the value of integrity in leadership. Emily watched as the audience hung onto his every word. She felt a sense of pride, knowing she had played a part in helping him rediscover his purpose. After the session, Mr. Thompson found Emily waiting outside. You were incredible in there, she said. He chuckled. I suppose I have a good mentor. She raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? I think you got that backwards. He smiled. No, Emily. You reminded me of who I was meant to be. I thought I had lost my purpose, but you showed me that it was never really gone. Emily felt a lump in her throat. Well, I just wanted to thank you for everything you've taught me. He placed a hand on her shoulder. And I'll keep teaching you. If you're interested, I'd love for you to be part of this mentorship program. You have a way of seeing potential in people, Emily. That's a rare gift. Her eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely. A wide grin spread across her face. I'd love that. As Emily walked home that evening, she reflected on how much had changed in just a short time. She had always believed that one small act of kindness could make a difference, but now she had witnessed it firsthand. A simple decision to share her lunch had led to something far greater than she could have imagined. It had reminded a man of his purpose, and in turn, he was now helping countless others find theirs. And as for Mr. Thompson, he had finally found peace, not in wealth or power, but in making a difference. Because in the end, success wasn't about how much you earned. It was about the impact you left behind.